Welcome back to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit. Over the past year, North America's automotive and manufacturing ecosystem has been pushed into unfamiliar territory. What began as tariff threats and political posturing quickly escalated into a full-blown stress test for cross-border supply chains, vehicle production schedules, energy flows, and consumer confidence. For decades, the US and Canada operated like a synchronized drivetrain, autos, steel, aluminum, and energy moving seamlessly across borders. But as Washington raised the stakes, that assumption cracked. Many expected Canada to fold under pressure. Instead, it recalibrated, reshaping investment decisions and industrial strategies across the continent. And to understand how this chain reaction started, we need to begin with the moment tariffs stopped being leverage and became something far more destructive. Tariffs go nuclear, from negotiation tool to economic weapon. This standoff didn't ignite overnight. It built pressure quietly before snapping into something far more disruptive. In early 2025, the Trump administration signaled a decisive change in tone toward Canada. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer openly floated the idea of walking away from the USMCA during its 2026 review, reframing the deal not as a stabilizing framework, but as leverage to be applied or discarded. For automakers and suppliers, that message landed like a sudden knock at red line. Modern vehicle manufacturing depends on frictionless borders. Engines assembled in Ontario cross into Michigan. Aluminum smelted in Quebec becomes body panels in Ohio, and a single tariff can ripple through dozens of plants. When Washington imposed 25% tariffs, later escalating some categories toward 45%, the assumption was simple: economic pressure would force concessions. President Trump escalated further by halting talks after Ontario aired an anti-tariff ad quoting Ronald Reagan. Negotiations stalled, tariffs hardened, and talk of splitting the USMCA into bilateral deals surfaced. At that point, tariffs stopped functioning as negotiating tools and became structural risks, especially for industries built on scale, predictability, and long-term capital planning. But instead of buckling under that pressure, Canada made a move that caught markets and automakers off guard. Canada rewrites the playbook. Vulnerability becomes leverage. Rather than scrambling for short-term relief, Canada recalibrated its entire approach. Ottawa reframed the confrontation as a long-term restructuring moment instead of a temporary dispute. Canadian officials made their position clear. Concessions would not come at the expense of sovereignty, supply chain security, or industrial independence, messages that resonated strongly with manufacturers already wary of policy volatility. That strategy was validated faster than many expected. By December 2025, the IMF confirmed Canada's economy held up better than forecast, despite U.S. tariff pressure. While employment and investment softened in pockets, USMCA exemptions shielded much of Canada's export engine. More revealing was capital behavior. Foreign direct investment surged by nearly $78 billion, pushing Canada's total FDI stock toward $1.5 trillion, among the highest ratios in the G20. Global automakers, battery producers, and advanced manufacturers increasingly treated Canada as a hedge against U.S. uncertainty. Supply chains were re-engineered into dual tracks, one optimized for USMCA compliance, another aligned with Europe and Asia. Stability, not proximity alone, became Canada's competitive advantage in a high-voltage trade environment. Before we delve deeper, do us a favor and smash that like and subscribe button. This helps us reach more auto enthusiasts just like you. All right, now let's shift gears and see how this pressure campaign began boomeranging back home. The tariff boomerang. U.S. economy starts taking damage. While Canada adapted, warning lights began flashing inside the United States. Manufacturing contracted for 9 consecutive months into late 2025, the longest downturn since the 2008 financial crisis. Transport equipment makers, often bellwethers for automotive health, cut jobs and quietly shifted production abroad to manage rising costs and uncertainty. Consumer data told a similar story. Motor vehicle and parts dealers reported a 1.6% monthly sales decline, while Cyber Monday growth slowed to just 2.6%. Higher prices, tighter credit, and rising auto loan delinquencies squeezed households already running lean. Job creation averaged only 17,000 per month, with nearly all gains confined to healthcare, while manufacturing, logistics, wholesale trade, and transportation shed workers. Corporate America pushed back as well. Costco filed legal claims seeking tariff refunds, potentially exposing the U.S. Treasury to billions. Tourism revealed another unintended consequence. Canadian travel to the U.S. dropped 33% year over year, draining revenue from border states. Ironically, as those cracks widened in the U.S., Canada was doing the opposite, reinforcing its industrial base. Canada rebuilds at home: industry, supply chains, control. As uncertainty intensified south of the border, Canada doubled down on resilience at home. Ottawa rolled out incentives aimed at localizing production, reducing reliance on U.S.-sourced components, and strengthening domestic supply chains. For automakers and suppliers, this wasn't about isolation. It was about keeping assembly lines running smoothly when trade friction threatens to seize the drivetrain. Industry surveys showed strong support for nearshoring and local sourcing, especially among manufacturers burned by policy unpredictability. This push aligned cleanly with global automotive trends. EVs, hybrids, battery storage, and clean energy systems all depend on secure access to critical minerals: nickel, cobalt, graphite, and uranium, resources Canada holds in abundance. Ottawa made its stance clear. Access would be negotiated strategically, not assumed. Domestic suppliers expanded capacity, partnerships with European and Asian firms deepened, and clean tech investment accelerated. All of this momentum now funnels toward a single make-or-break moment. USMCA 2026 Showdown: who really holds power? As formal USMCA review talks approach in early 2026, the stakes couldn't be higher. Canada's appointment of financier Mark Wiseman as ambassador to Washington signaled that capital markets, industrial policy, and long-term investment, not sound bites, will define negotiations. While President Trump appears politically insulated at home, global conditions are shifting fast. China's slowdown, uneven global demand, and jittery capital markets are pushing investment toward predictable environments. That's why analysts are now discussing a once unthinkable scenario: Canada emerging as North America's parallel manufacturing anchor for EVs, batteries, energy, and critical minerals. If the U.S. weakens the USMCA framework, it may accelerate exactly that outcome. Washington's leverage is no longer uncontested. Canada supplies the majority of U.S. crude oil imports, most electricity imports, and critical volumes of steel, aluminum, uranium, and defense-related minerals. As Mark Carney bluntly put it, access is an opportunity, not a certainty. Which brings us to the unavoidable question: did this strategy actually backfire? Verdict: when pressure triggers realignment. This confrontation was meant to force alignment. Instead, it accelerated transformation. Canada absorbed short-term pain, but used the moment to diversify trade, reinforce supply chains, and reposition itself as a stable industrial hub in an increasingly volatile world. For the automotive sector, the lesson is unmistakable. Policy predictability now matters just as much as labor costs, scale, or proximity. Capital follows certainty, and automakers plan years, not election cycles, ahead. The United States remains an industrial heavyweight, but leverage weakens when uncertainty becomes permanent. Tariffs can grab headlines, but they also rewrite balance sheets, investment plans, and supply chain maps. As the 2026 USMCA review approaches, the real question is no longer whether Canada can endure pressure, but whether Washington underestimated the downstream consequences of applying it. So where does this leave North America? Are we heading toward renewed cooperation, or a lasting redistribution of industrial power? Will Canada become the preferred safe harbor for EV, battery, and critical mineral investment? And have automakers already begun planning for a more fragmented trade future? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of the next major vehicle and industry shifts, Subscribe to Piston Pundit to get notified about upcoming updates and deep dives. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next pit stop. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.